with page transitions, okay? So here's a bad example of a page transition, and then you can tell me what is bad about it. So what's bad about that page transition?
There's no ease in, no ease out. It's
right?
very plain.
No ease in, no ease out, very plain. Anything else?
Too many colors.
Too many colors.
Long.
It's long. It's incredibly long and slow, right? 5 seconds is an incredibly long time for this. These page transitions are meant to be quick. We have one piece of footage here. We want to go to this piece of footage, and we don't want to rely on a boring fade, okay? You don't want to just fade this one out and fade this one in because that gets very repetitive. You want to do something that's dynamic. The whole point of this is that we can go from this to this and still maintain some velocity, maintain some momentum in our animation. Usually what happens is when you create an animation, you're communicating to the person what you want them to think and feel and experience. So any halt in that pulls that animation out of it, okay? As a teacher, I get to watch a lot of demo reels, and one of the things that happens in there is that individually, this is a good piece, this is a good piece, and this is a good piece, but when you put them together, what happens is it ramps up, and it's a really cool piece, and then it ramps down, and then it ramps up again, and then it ramps down. And so you're kind of like on this roller coaster of motion as you're watching this demo reel, and that's not what you want. You want to have ramp up, really exciting, really exciting, really exciting, and then it kind of ramps down at the very end, okay? So that's the kind of thing that we want to use. The same thing with these transitions. We want to be able to pull the audience in and keep them exactly where we want them. We don't want to pull them in and then say, okay, now wait a second, I'm going to do something. Okay, now get excited again. Okay, hold on, now get excited again. We want that excitement to be throughout the entire thing. So exactly what you said, the colors are horrible. We can't just pick random colors, okay? I'm going to talk about colors today also. We can't have things that are just linear, just boring, going straight across, and we can't have things that are too slow and too just long, right? So that's bad thing number one. Now let's look at bad thing number two. Okay, so I just enhanced bad thing number one just by adding something on top of it. And you can see how slow this is going, just loading it up initially. The first one went pretty quick. Now this one's going a bit slower because we have more stuff going on. Okay, I think 5 seconds is probably good for that. So what's bad about this one?
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work. There's no reason for the lightning to be there. It doesn't add to it. It actually distracts us because now we have competing stuff, right? We have this sliding in the background, we have the lightning in the foreground, and we're not sure what to look at. Remember when we looked at the 12 principles of animation and they showed that guy walking over a hill, slipping on a banana peel, and then everyone jumping up and looking at him and then his expression. That's what we need to do, is we need to direct the audience as to what we want them to look at. And right now we have too much stuff going on and it's competing, all these things. We don't know what to pay attention to. All right, so we got that one. It's ridiculous. The lightning effect, this is advanced lightning. That's one of the effects. It can be a neat thing. Just to show where it might be useful to use like the advanced lightning or use some of the more advanced lightning tools. So again, not that we have to say it, but what would be bad about this one? Everything. The entire thing is bad. We have the same stuff going on from the first one till now. There's too much happening. The colors are horrible. We don't know what to pay attention to. It's just a mess, okay? And again, it's not that it's not fancy. It's not that we're not showing off After Effects. We're showing off that we know After Effects, but we're not showing how to use it correctly, okay? So in most cases, simplicity is going to be the key. It looks very weird. All right. So we get the idea. Those are horrible. So now I'm going to jump to my other ones here on the P drive for page transitions. All right, so this is where we left off last time, showing some of these different ways we can create a transition. And what works about all of these is they're quick. They get us from point A to point B. That's their intention, okay? Now, even in like character animation stuff or anything that you do in After Effects, the simpler, the better. Have you seen the motion graphics McDonald's commercial? Div. Okay, we want these things to just be exactly what they are meant to be, taking us from one color to another color, or one comp, one image to another image, okay? So one of the things that kind of makes this not work so good, I mean, it works, but one thing that can really enhance it is something called motion blur, okay? Basically, if you've seen any videos before, like with your phone, usually you don't have really a clear frame. It's usually just like this big blur if someone's running or you're moving your phone. It's just this big blur of stuff. So motion blur enhances this because it makes us feel like it has a little bit more motion, a little more speed than it actually does. So in After Effects, there's two buttons we need to click on to see motion blur. One of them is right here. So this one will actually turn motion blur on so that we could see it for all the layers we want motion blur. So if I click that, we'll be able to see motion blur for all the layers that are clicked on. Some layers, we may want that layer to be crystal clear, and it may not have motion blur. This other layer has a lot of motion. We want it to have motion blur, okay? So right now, it's clicked on, but I don't see anything different. None of these layers have motion blur checked, okay? This same icon here is also right there. So if I go and I highlight these, you'll see we get a little fuzz now, because now it's actually blurring their motion. It says if you're here and then you're there, what I'm going to do is go in between the frames and create this little blurring pattern. And so we get a little bit more motion happening on those, excuse me, because it seems like they're going a little bit quicker because there's that. Imagine like a helicopter propeller spinning. We don't really notice how fast it's going unless it has motion blur, okay? And just to emphasize that point, let me go to a new composition. Sure. And I'm going to make a new solid. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use the shape, okay? These rectangle tools here, if I'm clicked on a solid and I start drawing stuff, it's going to create a mask, basically like cutting it out. So if I just go like this, and then I draw another one like that, there we go, and then I can manipulate these. And basically I can create whatever shape I want. I'm gonna click off the one and click on this. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of get this lined up so it's kind of propeller-esque. There we go. Perfect. Okay. So now I'm going to take this. I'm going to move my pivot point right there, and I'm just going to animate the rotation. So I'm going to go from here, go to 5 seconds, and then rotate it around. Okay. Now this number right here, when we do the rotation, this is degrees. Okay. So 360 degrees around is 1 revolution. Okay. So if I rotate it 360 degrees, I get 1 revolution. So if I change this to 2 or 3 or 10 or 15, that means go around that many times. Okay. So now if we look at this, woo, there we go. Now once I add motion blur to this, we're going to see we get a bit of a different effect. Okay. Now we can enhance this effect by going under our comp settings. So under composition, we have composition settings, and here is the size that we played with before, but then there's an advanced tab. And in the advanced tab, we have motion blur settings. So we could add more samples per frame if we needed more samples, if it was coming out choppy. Like if I only did 2, it may not look very good. That's not updating. Okay. I could also play with the shutter phase, and this is going to control when the motion blur happens. So sometimes what happens is we want the motion blur to be a trail behind it. Sometimes you want it to be kind of like in between, like in this case, and sometimes you want it after, so you can play with that. We can also play with the shutter angle, and you can see 0 takes it off, and then higher than 0 is going to enhance it. So the higher up I go, you can see that we can get more of that propeller look to it. So if we're trying to emulate a helicopter propeller spinning, that would be what we'd want to play with. Okay? And now eventually we'll get into then taking this kind of thing that's spinning like this and learning how we can then take it and rotate it and actually put it into our scene as an actual like prop. Okay? So motion blur is definitely going to be a helpful thing to have on, especially for stuff like this. I turn all my motion blurs on, I turn this button on, and then we get that motion blur effect showing it. Especially like in these frames, it looks really nice where you can see that little beam right there. Now sometimes it is a little bit too much and you're like, okay, well I just need to tone it down. I need some motion blur, but I need to lower the amount of motion blur because it might be just a little bit too much. So maybe I go with like something like that. Okay, so as we start to play with stuff, that's something, again, we'll want to have checked on. So when we do our keyframes, we don't leave them as linear. We set them to easy ease, and then we tweak our graph. Remember that from last week. We go into our stuff, and we change the speed graph so that we have some sort of transition here. So it goes slow to fast, or fast to slow, or whatever it is we're trying to get across. Then we turn motion blur on. Now again, this is going to take some time to calculate. You go to one I don't have motion blur on, this one. I do have motion blur on that one. There we go. Okay, so I turn motion blur off. Now I may want to keep these buttons on, and this is simply a toggle to turn off or turn on the visibility. So if I open up that lightning one where I had all the stuff going on, I turn motion blur on everything in there, it would just bog the system down. It might take forever to load each frame. So I can just uncheck this and it won't load that frame in, or it won't load the motion blur for it. Okay? So that's just your toggle just to turn on motion blur for the entire comp or to turn it off. Or if you don't want a specific layer to have motion blur, you can turn off those specific layers to not motion blur. Okay? Typically for something that's going to be moving, you want to have motion blur as you're working. Now as for color selection, there's a bunch of resources out there that are great for choosing color. One of them is Adobe Color. Yes, sir. All right. Color.adobe.com. They call it Cooler. That's what it used to be called, but now it's just called Adobe Color. And what this does is it helps you select colors. So one of the things when I first started doing artsy stuff is that choosing colors was always an issue. I would go in there, and not as bad as the lightning example, but pretty bad. I would grab just colors. Like I want blue, I'm going to grab blue. I want green, I'm going to grab green. So it helps to have some harmony in those color selections. Okay, so you're not just randomly picking colors out of a box. Mm-hmm.
You can get that in the After Effects itself, or the Windows extension, Adobe Color Themes.
Right.
It comes up as just a panel.
Right, and you can get it right there too.
Yeah, and that has favorites, popular. You can even create your own themes and save them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is another way that you can access it right inside the software. Yeah. Now the biggest thing is for me, what helped open my eyes was it was basically like math. So my background before I got into art was I was going to be a programmer, and then programming was really boring, so I got out of programming. But I still maintain that theory of how programming works and the mathematics behind it. So if you look at these things, all these colors are actually related somehow. It's not just these look good together. There's actually math that goes into making them look good. So the way it works is just like on the website here, and this here, is that you go around and you pick a base color. Like I like blue, so I'm going to go pick a blue. And then it's going to show you, here's your base color, and then here are other colors that work together well with that. And based on what you've selected up here, it will select other things. So just like the website has, you can pick different colors. So you can go to monochromatic. So you're basically all in the same line of that blue you picked, but now you have different versions of it. You have a desaturated version, you have darker versions of that same color. you have triad, which is grabbing this color, but then it's also grabbing colors along this other spectrum. And then you have complementary, which is the opposite. And then you have compound. Okay? So here's how I look at all these colors, is that the color wheel is actually a circle. Okay? So 360 degrees around is what I look at that as. So as I'm picking a color here, and it doesn't even, there it is. If you look down here at the HSB, as I spin this number around, you can see how that first number goes all the way from 0, if I can get close enough to it, right there. As I spin around, you can see that it goes all the way around to 360 degrees. Okay? So that's my hue. And as we're in After Effects, there is an HSB slider that we can control the rotation of our colors. So if we're in green and we want to rotate all our colors to blue, we can do that. The next number here is saturation. So that's going to control our closeness to that center point. How pure is that color? So right now, the color is not very pure, so there's very little saturation, so we're ending up with a white. As I pull this up, we're ending up with a very saturated color. Okay? So right now I have a 360, which is essentially the same thing as 0. A fully saturated, and then this last one is the brightness. Okay? So that's going to be the darkness or the lightness of it. On here there's no slider, it's just this slider down here. Okay? And that will affect just how dark that color is, or how white it is. So I look at these numbers as actual numbers. So 360, 100, and 100 is a fully saturated color. If I want the complement of that, all I have to do is cut that number in half. So instead of this being 360, it'll be 180. And I would get the complement of that color. Okay? I don't know why I went down here. Unless this is in 360s here. Yep, I guess that's just where it is. It's not a actual circle is what I'm looking at. But anyway, 180 is the opposite color there. And then we could go into, let's say I wanted something that's less saturated. I could go with like a 50% or whatever. So when I'm choosing colors, what I do is very similar to what this is, where I choose from here, I'll choose a color that I like to start off with. Let me just hide that, because I'll do it inside here. Okay, so even though this isn't a circle, you can see that it still has the HSB, okay, which treats it very much like a circle. So if I like that 180 blue, and I like it to be 100% saturated, and maybe 50% like that. Like that, okay? So I like that blue right there. I'm just gonna round these so that the math is easier. So here's one of my colors that I like to pick. So there's that blue. I'm just going to set it off to the side. So now I'm going to duplicate it and just scoot it over and change the colors of the next one. And my next one, in order for me to get colors that work with this one, I'm just going to use some sort of math to do that. Okay, in my math, I look at that 190 and I'll just, let's say I cut it in half. Okay, so instead of 190, it's going to be 95. Okay, and duplicate that again. Scoot it over, solid settings, and I can put this at 0, and we shrink these all so that they're smaller. And then it was 190 was the first one, so it would be 190 plus, it's too early for math, 190 plus 285. Okay. So if I needed something that was very contrasty to each color, I could choose something like this. And basically this is choosing one color from each of those specific areas, but they all kind of work together because they're all on the same plane. It's not like I went in and just grabbed. Let me duplicate them and shuffle them over. It's not like I went into this and just grabbed a random green like that, because you can see that this green here really doesn't work well with these other colors, okay? So I like to use that as my method of color selection. And the same way that I did it with these random colors, I could do that same thing with different colors of blue. So I could, instead of taking this number, I could just go to this number and go to 60. There might not be enough change, no. I don't know what I just did. There we go. I'm just going to go up here because I think I hit a hotkey that was on there. So I can go to this saturation and maybe knock it down to 40. That might be a better, yeah, there we go. So that's more contrasty than the other one was. Or whatever. And I can cut this down to 0 and have something very little contrast. And again, these colors will work together because they're actually like linked. There's some sort of connection between them, whether it's done using something like Cooler, or the color, or it's done with me just picking colors and using the math. That's all these are doing. These are already connecting them some way. And the cool thing is you can use this in any program. So Photoshop has this, Illustrator has this, After Effects has this, InDesign has this. And if you find something that you really, really like, let me change this to Triad. You find something you really like, you can save this color scheme and reuse it across the board. So if you designed a logo in InDesign and you're using it in Illustrator, using it in InDesign, you're coming into After Effects and using Photoshop, that color pattern can go into all of those different areas so that everything is in sync. Imagine creating a McDonald's logo where you used the wrong red or the wrong yellow. That could be a huge issue. Or you want to find colors that work with that right red and right yellow. That's a great way to use it. You can punch in what that right red is, and then you can find other colors that would work with that color combination. Okay. So as you choose colors, don't just pick random ones. Don't be like the other one that I showed at the beginning. Pick colors that are actually going to work together, that are going to complement what you're doing. And also keep in mind what your important things are. So like in this case, we really see that bright one. Now my screen's a bit brighter. That bright one is a bit more vibrant on my screen. So if I'm trying to call something out, I may want to use a brighter color as my calling out color. But if the entire screen is really bright, I may use a dark color to call out certain things or to bring the focus over there. Okay? So the moral of that is just pick good colors. Don't just pick random colors as we do this. And also keep in mind that what you're going to be displaying on. Some devices can't display that color very good. So you may not want to choose something super neon in your scene, especially the one I showed with all those stars and whatever else. That could be a horrible thing to go through the entire process and realize that your colors just aren't working. Okay? All right. So on to the actual, like, what the assignment is going to be turned in as. So what I want to do is I want to have something that introduces what this is. So if I go to this, new folder, 100, example. All right. So here I go from one thing to another, and you can see how I'm transitioning in here. Then I have the page transitions, and it goes out. That's the purpose of the page transitions. So what I want you to do is I want you to think of, this is horrible colors, by the way. I didn't pick the colors. The red and these blues are just too different. But what I want you to do is create something like this where you're showing off a couple page transitions, and then you have a title showing what you're showing off, and then they go away at the end. Okay? So you're going to take your 5 that you've done, and you're going to have a little title added in there. And you can see that the title is exactly this. You see how it just comes in, but it's not as big as the rest of it. Now I did use a little cheat in order to make this kind of pop a little bit more on these 2 layers here. I went in and I added a shape layer. Okay, so over here these are all shape layers. So these are very similar to a solid in the fact that if I click on nothing, I can just go in here and just drag, and I have a shape. Okay, whatever shape it is. I don't recommend dragging though, because what happens is as we drag, it doesn't center this, it doesn't center that, and things get off, especially when we try to move stuff around. It just doesn't line up right. So what I recommend doing, I'm going to go to a brand new composition just so I can not have all this other stuff showing. Don't save. 9020, there we go. I'm going to go to my shape layer, and if you just double click it, it fills it to that entire screen. That's the best way to do it, because that way you have more control over where the item is. And then from here, we can go to the contents, I can go to the rectangle, I can go to the transform rectangle, and then I can scale this down or unlock it and scale it to get it lined up. Okay? Once it's lined up as to where I want it on my screen, then I can go through and hit S for scale, and now I'm controlling the scale of this thing very, very quickly. Okay? So I can start it off at 0, set a key, come up to like 2 seconds. And I use 2 seconds just as my starting point. Eventually those things will be moved and aligned so that it happens a bit quicker. So now, oh, why didn't anyone tell me I didn't click the right thing? I clicked that. There we go. All right. Okay. Again, 2 seconds is way too slow. So I can pull this over. Okay, still too slow. Pull it over some more. All right, so that might be a good speed, but now I just need to set this to easy ease, go to my graph editor, make sure I'm editing the speed graph, which I am. And I think I want to go fast at the beginning. There we go. So something like that. So that's much better. Okay. So now that I have this popping open, what I can do is I'm going to duplicate it. All my color information is up here. So I want to make the top one a better color than this bright red. So I'm going to pick my base color. Let's say I go to that blue. And it might seem ridiculous to type in colors. I just like my numbers to be even. So 210 there. And then on the bottom, I can't see it. So I'm going to go into my contents, into my rectangle, into my transform, into my scale. And I linked them, and I'm just going to, I don't need to link them. I'm just going to scale them up individually. A little bit lower here, lower there. There we go. So something like that. And then the color for this one, I'm just going to eyedrop the blue as my starting point, and then I'm just going to darken it. There we go. So that works. So you see those two colors look a lot better together than that red and the blue look together. All right. So then I can just offset number 1 here. Okay, and you see how they just fit. I didn't have to adjust any other keyframes. I just adjusted the size of that shape layer. So the neat thing about shape layers is that they have actually 2 different areas to adjust the size. So basically we can just make it bigger and all our animation still works. Okay, and I can try it the other way too. What if the bottom one comes out first? That works too. Okay, maybe motion blur on there. Okay, that's cool. If I need to, I can go into here and edit the keys. Maybe I want it to come out just a little bit quicker. There we go, that's better. Let me add some text to this. So I'm going to double click my text tool, which centers it right in the center of our screen, which is where I want my text to be. And I'm just going to write page transitions. I'm going to put, there's a paragraph. So in every program that's Adobe, window paragraph gets you to the paragraph. Window character opens the character. You can control things like the size of your text here. We can nudge it down. So I switch back to my move tool, and I can just nudge this down. I can control which font, and just like everything else, we don't want the font to be crazy. We want this to be readable, okay? And if you can read it 3 times while it's on screen, then it's perfect. A neat thing you can do, I don't know if you know this, but you can just use the arrows and it'll cycle through the stuff as you're going. So that might be a neat one to use. Okay, as long as it's legible from that distance. Page transitions. And it's spelled right. Make sure spelling is correct also. All right, that's cool, that's cool. All right, so again, I have to create some sort of way to get that page transitions on the screen. So maybe I'll just vertically scale it, because I already went horizontally, so it might be neat to go vertical. So my pivot, if you look at it, my pivot is right here at the bottom, right? So when I scale that one, it's gonna come right from the bottom and look like it's actually growing, okay? Instead of like scaling out of nowhere. So I go to my scale, I turn my linker off, I turn my Y to 0. There it goes. I'm going to set a keyframe. I did it again. I'm going to set a keyframe. I'm going to go up a little bit. I'll set it to 100. Okay, it's a bit slow. So let me go into my graph editor here. Easy ease, graph editor. And come on, there we go. So I'm just gonna nudge it that way. Okay, so it definitely looks like it's growing out of nothing, or it might be like flipping upwards, which is kind of cool. Now you'll notice that I did the keyframes right at the beginning of my animation. Okay, now what I don't like to do is I don't like to have keyframes in the middle like this, where all this space is doing nothing. That doesn't make sense. It's easier to keep them right at the beginning. That way I can just move the whole bar exactly where I want it to be. So boom, boom, boom. Okay, page transitions. All right, now I'm going to put this on a different composition right now, because right now there's nothing behind it. So I could go in here, change the composition setting. I'm going to eyedrop the blue here and pick a different color like 30. And 10. Might be a little bit too much. 50. There we go. So maybe something like that. Now I'm noticing that there's a small line going around this. I don't like that line, so I'm going to go to my shape layer. I'm going to turn off my stroke. You can click on the stroke word and turn off your stroke. Okay, I don't like the stroke being on there. It's distracting being that small, especially. Okay, so those colors, I like that color mix better. Okay, so there's page transitions. Now what I want to do is I want to give a little bit more movement, a little bit more contrast, and have them pop out a little bit more, because they're still kind of getting lost into this. I'm going to set my work area to right there. Okay, so what I can do is I can do what's called a drop shadow. I'm sure you're familiar with it if you've seen Photoshop before. They have the effects and they have a thing called drop shadow. After Effects has the same exact thing. Now it is somewhere inside this huge list, there is a drop shadow, and I believe it's under generate. I'm probably wrong. I am wrong, see? It's under one of these things where it's like drop shadow somewhere. The easiest way to get to it is go to that effects and presets and just type in drop shadow. Perspective, that's where it was. See, I was way off. So I just drop this right onto that layer. And then now I have those same controls we would have in Photoshop right here. So I can control the softness, I can control the distance, and you can see how this is going to pop off the page a little bit nicer than if we didn't have that drop shadow. And the neat thing about it is once I set this up, let me soften it a smidge more. That's good. Once I have this set up, I can copy, so I just click on the drop shadow and copy it, go to the other layer and paste it, and now they'll both have that drop shadow, okay? So it's a neat way to be able to add those things in there. So now if we rewind it and play, you'll see how that reads a little bit nicer. Yes, sir?
Does it have to be text? Can it be a countdown like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1? Or does it have to say?
I want it to say page transition so that if we're viewing it, we know what it is.
Fair enough.
Okay?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So are we just like combining all 5 of them together and make one at the end of the page transition? Or each?
You can do it however you want as far as the layout of it. You could do like 2 page transitions from one to the other, and then you go into this, and then you do the other 2. That would be acceptable too. Or you can do all 5, and at the end it says page transitions, or you can do this and then have the page transitions. The idea is that you have some sort of title, and you're blending between all 5 of these. Okay? So as we swipe from one to the other, it should be very easy as to how it does that. All right. So I'm just setting this up here. There it is. Now if I go into this area, remember I went to a new comp just to kind of clear everything off? You don't have to do that. I wanted to show you that just so you can see the next thing where I can go in here and import my file. Okay, so anything you've created outside of After Effects can be imported into After Effects. So I'm going to go and find that piece of footage, which is on here, which is here, which is there, which is there, which is first day playing. Okay, so it brings it all in inside this nice little folder once it loads it, and it says not responding. There we go. Okay, so inside here I have all of those compositions. So it's very important, obviously, that we named our stuff in the other composition if we're going to be doing that. Naming things is incredibly, incredibly important. So I'm going to go and drag one of these things into this. So here you can see what this transition is. Like that, right? So it goes just like that. So what I can do is cut this. Like I know that this one ends pretty much like right there. So I'm going to use Alt and right bracket, and I cut that layer. So now it's gone. Okay, so I can go do. There's the green one. And then I want something else to happen, so I'm going to drag another one down. And this one is, oops, let me hide this one so I can see what the other one is doing. This one is that one going the other way. Okay, so I'm going to take this and just scoot it until the end of the green one. So it goes here, here, here. It transitions to green. And then the other one is going to go, oops, I need to extend this a little bit longer. Then the other one is going to transition from there. So it goes all the way to green. And then my other one drops in and also goes to green because it's based off the same one. And then my next one, which is that one, let me double click it and see what it is. All right, this is my crazy one that I was showing. I don't need that. Yep, because I just go to blue. Okay, so I'm going to drag this one onto here and drag it to the end of that. Okay, now we get to blue. All right, so maybe at this point, that's when I'll have my other one pop in that says Page Transitions. Okay, or I want all these to be my Page Transitions. That's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to scoot all these down. Okay, so I get this, Page Transitions, and then I'm going to scoot this right to the end. And then here comes this wipe. Here comes that wipe. Here comes this wipe. And that just means I have to extend that further. Okay, and then I would have my other two wipes right after that. So when I'm done with this, it'll say Page Transitions, and then I get to see all these different transitions that I've done. This is probably the easiest way to do it just because you're just stacking your stuff right on top of it. And then this is my, I didn't do anything with that one. Comp 1. Oops, there's that one. I'm just going to hide these. There we go. So I can just drop that one into my layer 2. And then I move it down. That's why it's important that you have your animation kind of set up perfectly at the beginning of these so that it just goes. Right at the beginning, it just starts animating. There we go. So now I have 4 of them in there, and I could obviously add another one into that mix too. And it gives you a good idea too. It gives you a good feel for how each one of these is playing. Because as you're watching it, you're going to see like this, the brown one originally, it looked pretty good. But now that I'm looking at it with all the other ones, it actually seems like it's going maybe a little bit too slow, right? Now, because I have motion blur turned on in the other layers, you can see that we're getting the motion blur, and I can still turn it off on that, even though in here, none of these have motion blur on them. Okay? So even though the motion blur isn't checked here, when I turn this on, it is blurring any of the ones that have the motion blur checked on here. Okay? So just be aware of that. And all of your edits, everything is linked. Okay, so if I decided that this one is going too slow, I can go back into this one. I hit U so I can see all my keyframes. It's a lot of keyframes. And then I could grab all my keyframes, and this one it's actually too complex to show. Let me show a more simple one. That one. There we go. So in this one, I can hit U. The bottom one doesn't do anything. I don't even know why it's there. And I could grab all my keyframes, and I could just scoot them in or scoot them out just to adjust how fast that's going to go. Okay? So if you need to, adjust your timing so that it works. So that when you're looking at this in your final one and you see your page transitions, you see all these things happening, that it makes sense from one to the other one as far as speed goes. Like I would definitely go, before I turn this one in, I'd want to go and fix that brown one because it's way, way, way too slow. I would also look at the colors and say, I really don't like the coloring in here. I'm going to go adjust it. So I'm going to go back to my page transition 2 with speed. And this was something we were just playing around with, but I can just go to color correction, and where's my hue? There it is. And here I can rotate it. Oops, that's the wrong one. There it is. So I can rotate it to get different colors. I can take my saturation down for all of these and whatever. And that will affect everything that's here. So you see that now it's affected there.
So if you do one thing on like your original and then go to the new one, they're like linked together.
Right, they're all linked together. Okay, so the only way that they wouldn't be linked is when I imported this in. That basically brings that into this stuff, and this is like locked in here. This is no longer like linked to the other one. It's actually inside this composition. Okay. So don't be afraid to play around with that. So at the end of this, you should have a title, and then you should have 5 distinct page transitions, one to the other. Okay? With motion blur, with some nice motion on the speeds of each one of these. Okay? Any questions? How do we get it out of After Effects? Good question. Forget about these little things. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. So to get it out of After Effects, we can import stuff, right? Just like every other program. We can also export stuff. So in here, there's several different ways to export things. You'll see one of them as a Premiere Pro project. One of the workflows for doing, like, you remember the video that we just watched of that guy doing the fight scene with the clones? So originally what happened is he went out and he videotaped himself without all those visual effects doing the stuff, okay? Just like you would think that they would do it. And then he brought it into a program like Premiere, and he edited what he was doing in each pose. So he was like, okay, this is the long shot, this is me standing here, this is this, and he edited the entire thing back to back to back. And then he said, in this shot, I need some visual effects. So he took that shot from Premiere and said, edit in After Effects. And it sends it into After Effects so that he can edit the video here, add lightning, add whatever, and then he can send it back to Premiere after he's done, okay? That's not what we're doing, but just so you can see that workflow. So we're going to do the simple way for the first one, which is just adding it to the render queue. Okay? The render queue is basically like, here's all the stuff I've done. Now I need you to process it so that other people can see it. Because right now, mom and dad can't watch this unless they have After Effects and they open up your file and then they hit the play button and it loads in the RAM. That's kind of a hassle. So we click on the word lossless, and this is going to be the same thing. So you may want to write these settings down for all of the things that we do. So every time that you work, let me start over just so you can take a comprehensive set. The first thing I need to do is make sure that this isn't an extremely long thing. Like right now, I don't have anything happening after 12 seconds or so. So I don't need all this other stuff. So I need to make sure my work area defines what I want out. Okay? I don't have a bunch of nothing happening after this. Then I go to Export, Add to Render Queue. And then I just have to click on 2 basically buttons here. I click on the word lossless. Yes, ma'am.
What button did you click first?
File, Export, and then Add to Render Queue. And then in here, I'm going to click on the word lossless. And then everything that we render out is going to be QuickTime formatted. So that's where we choose up here, QuickTime. Okay, format QuickTime. And then QuickTime itself is just the file extension. Okay, so it's just like a QuickTime.mov file. Now we need to actually get into something that is smaller in size. Okay, so I'm going to come over here to Format Options. And for the video codec, I'm going to choose H.264. Okay, H.264 is a compressor. So it's basically going to take all of our frames and it's going to compress them so that it can play back. Because right now it's uncompressed. It's playing back exactly as it has the footage. So we want to compress it so it's not incredibly huge. So we choose H.264 for the video codec. Everything else should be fine. The default quality is always at 100. These are typically off, which is fine. We're going to hit OK. And then we hit OK again. Then we have to tell it where we want this to go. So we hit the word not yet specified. And we tell this I want it to go to Sarcona page transitions. Final. Okay? So you're going to label all of your stuff, your last name, the project, final. Okay? That way I know which file I'm looking at. So if you have 38 movies in there for some reason, I'm only going to look for the one that's labeled your last name with the final in there. Okay? So last name, page transitions, final. And then we just hit render. People forget the last step. You actually have to hit render. And this is the part where it's actually going to go through and it's going to render all the stuff out. It's going to go to frame 1 and save it out. Frame 2, save it out. 3. And it's going to put all those into one movie file that we could then just double click and watch or upload to YouTube and share or do whatever we want with. Put it on a CD or a DVD or whatever. This process here, you can see how long this is going to take. It's doing 13 minutes of footage. Right now I'm at 2 minutes and 26 frames. If I open this little drop down, it'll actually tell me how long each frame is taking. It'll actually give me an estimated file size. And I believe, oh, there it is. Estimated time remaining is 3 minutes. Okay? So this is a good indicator as to how much time this is going to take. If it says 38 minutes and it's 2 o'clock, you may not want to render your stuff. You may want to save it for next time or hang out for another 38 minutes. You'll see there it took a boost. Okay? What it does is it doesn't look at the entire footage. It looks at the specific frame that it's at. And if that specific frame is taking an hour a frame, that's ridiculous, but if it's taking an hour a frame, it's going to say this is going to take an incredibly long time. So now it's down to 1 minute. And so what we should have after we're all done with this is that we should have inside of my 2200 folder, inside work, inside page transitions. I think it went inside here too, maybe. We'll wait and see. We should have an actual MOV file that we can open up and watch. If you're on a Mac, there's actually other options you could pick, but these are typically the best ones that are out there. If you go to something like YouTube or Facebook or any of those things, they may have specific settings that they want you to use. Because what happens sometimes is you upload your video to YouTube or to Vimeo or to Facebook and you've lost stuff. You've lost quality. You've lost resolution. So here it's showing you H.264 is the video codec you want to use to upload to YouTube. And here are some extra settings that you could have inside there. Okay, so you can read about that. And if you don't upload your video right, you could end up with something like this. So you have these bars on the side where you shouldn't have the bars. Or you have them like that, or you have them like double, or you have just like random stuff where your video just looks literally like junk, like it looks horrible on YouTube. So you can see the process for this is pretty straightforward. It's just that file export, click the word lossless and choose QuickTime, H.264, click the file name, label it correctly, and hit render. Every time it's that same step, okay? As we get further in the semester, we'll work on different ways to export it that are a little bit better, a little bit cleaner. This is the quickest way. It's not the best way to do things. Okay, for now we're going with the quickest. Yes, ma'am.
Click the word lossless.
Yes, right here is the word lossless. Okay, right now it says QuickTime because I've chosen QuickTime, but that's where you would choose lossless from this list and then pick QuickTime. When you go to export, you'll see it. It'll be a blue hyperlink. There we go. So now I'm all done. And if you'll notice, I can't find my file. It's here somewhere, right?
You might save it to your Google Disk.
I may have. J. New folder. Thank you. There it is. Now, a good thing about naming it with your name, Sarcona, is that I can search the entire computer for anything labeled Sarcona, and it'll pull up all my files. So there it is. I double click it. Whistle a little tune. Notice my file size is also 5 megabytes, which is a great file size to have for something like this. There we go. Now I did notice there was a pop of green at one point. There's also a green on the left side, which I'd have to investigate why that's there. And play it again. So there, it's good. Everything's happy there. Here's green. And notice there's going to be a pop right there of green. So I'd want to go back in After Effects, fix that, delete this movie, re-render it out. Okay? So I would go into here, I would go frame by frame-ish and try to figure out where is that green coming from. Okay, it's coming from this Page Transitions one. So let me go to the Page Transitions one and see why I'm getting green all of a sudden. I don't think I'm getting... It's right here. And I can turn this off and on just to see. I think, no. I don't know why they keep shortening like that. So this here is that, yes. Okay, so it might be on this one here. Yep, see this one here cut off. So it just stopped showing this one, and that's why it disappeared. So if I make this one longer, now I won't have that. So it'll go here. There's no green. There still is this green bar, and I turn the eyeball off just to see where it's coming from. It looks like it's coming from this right there. And it actually looks like it's coming from this layer being a tad bit too small. And I may have moved it. Nope. So really quick cheat fix is just to scale this up by 1 pixel or 1%. There we go. So now I don't have to worry about that. Cool. All right, so then I would just go back to File, go back to Export, add it to the render queue, click the word lossless, QuickTime, H264, hit OK. Choose my file name again, and it'll overwrite it as long as it's not open, which it isn't. And then I hit render, and then it renders out that whole thing again. Okay? So very quickly, we need to get that workflow of doing that, but that'll come. Okay.